Hello and welcome to the Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio Australia. It is fantastic to have this fellow by my side. Look, you've been doing it alone this morning. Tell you what, you might have issues. I'm not sure. Great to have Derek in the building. Mate, have we got a lot on the show today? I know we've got a lot all the way there in Vietnam. And when I say a lot, of course, I'm talking about Travis Carter. Hello, Mr. Carter.
You've been talking to my mum again, haven't you?
Oh, okay. We'll just brush over that. Move on. I will jump straight to you though, mate. What have we got on the show today? Quite a lot.
We want to get some updates happening as far as the tariffs are concerned, because all these nations are now coming to the table to negotiate.
Funny that.
And that's all coming out in terms of what are they negotiate. The hottest news that we don't know about, but talk about, you know what the radio teaser's like. Here it is. We dangle the carrot in front of you.
We would never do such a thing.
Give you all the information. Trump's just done that with, hey, we've done a deal with China, and we're not telling you the details till tomorrow. So something's on the table. We've got the slide for that. I think that Travis has got there, but the US has finalized a trade agreement with China after 2 days in discussion in Switzerland, of all places, with the full details coming out probably tonight as far as Australia time is concerned. He's saying you need to put the slide up there.
Oh, no, do you want me to bring it up? Do you want me to bring it up? Yes, I've got it here.
Here's this thing you could do. You could listen to the conversation, find an opportune moment, and then press the button.
Well, I haven't been here for like 2 weeks or something, and I've noticed
no, there's no excuses, mate. Come on.
Okay, famous flying it, but yeah, anyway.
All right, let's look at that then. There we go.
Let's have a quick read.
Fantastic.
I've got to put my binoculars on.
I know. I might just make the screen a bit bigger there. Oh, dear. All right.
Like I said, people have messed with things, and not that one.
There we go. Remember when we started the show and we could all see the screen? We've all gotten much older. There we go. Okay, there's all to be read, but
I think I'll read it off my computer.
I think so.
So what it's basically saying, this is from the White House, and for immediate release, US announces China trade deal in Geneva. The Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, I'm happy to report that we made substantial progress between the US and China in the report important trade talks. First, I want to thank our Swiss host. Thanks to Swiss. And then it says we had the vice premier, 2 vice ministers who were integrally involved, Ambassador Jameson and myself, and I spoke to President Trump and did Ambassador Jameson last night, and he's fully informed of what is going on. So it'll be a complete briefing tomorrow morning. They have basically said it was constructive, 2 days, and it's important how it will able to come to an agreement quickly, and that perhaps reflects differences, maybe not so as large as we thought they were. That being said, a lot of groundwork has come into the last couple of days, and the United States has a massive $1.2 trillion trade deficit with China, so the president's declared a national emergency and imposed tariffs. We're confident the ideal we struck with our Chinese partners will help us to improve our resilience. Now, let me just say that I don't know if it's 1.2 trillion I think it's overall, not with China itself.
Okay.
So that's important to differentiate.
It's a big number no matter what. Right?
It is. And you can see why America's hustling to get this done.
Yeah.
So apparently of course, China is one of the nations that has not had the 90-day brief to adjust to the idea of tariffs.
They got burnt immediately.
Well, they
chose to.
Tit for tat. Retaliation, it's doubled, and it got up to about 149%. There are some rumors that it may go down to 80%, which is still very high.
Huge.
But it's costing America's, I think, now making about $2 to $3 billion a day because of those trade tariffs. So
that's amazing.
It is so having an immediate impact. Watch the space as it unfolds, and it's kind of an interesting situation. How do you allow the Chinese also to save face here? So
I don't care about them saving face, quite frankly. I mean, I get it. Look, negotiations, and you've got to have harmony between the nations. But what we've seen from China for far too long has been full-on bullying. So, look, I'm a big believer. Okay, I know a lot of people don't agree with me, but I'm a big believer in confronting the bully. Okay, and sometimes a little bit of bullying is good. So I've got no issue with the way that Donald Trump has stood up for his people, for actually genuinely representing the people of the US.
To Trump's credit, he's basically said these countries have done this, and to their credit, they've done. Why wouldn't you? That's fantastic what they've been able to do from a business perspective, but no longer while I'm captain here. I think the issue with a lot of American companies is that they develop the new technology and then they take it to China to be manufactured, and then they lose their IP protection because they insist on, well, how's it being made? We need to do that, and there's no respect to trademarks and all that sort of stuff or intellectual property protections. as far as those patents have been
Yeah.
bought.
And this
paid
goes
for,
right across
registered.
everything. Yeah, I mean, you've got literally fake BMWs and fake this and fake that, right from that kind of level. Obviously, at the very, very simple level of things which are easier to manufacture and easier on the IP, they're all being pinched. So, you know what? You need to treat everybody with the same respect that they treat you.
So here's another one for you: the International Trade Appeals Tribunal. Over 80% of the claims actually come from China.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
It's a huge amount of IP theft, and the biggest problem is one of the sharks. I can't remember what his name is. The Shark Tank, where they say, "Hey, here's my idea." They invest in it. So one of those guys was sitting there, and who was saying that so many businesses he started to invest in spent millions. And he's doing $5, $10, $15 million worth of research into a product.
Yep.
Just to have China come out a week later from China, worse quality, cheap, nasty, and at an absolute fraction of the price. So it's just to the point, like, why bother when China's just steal it? So why
I just like to remember the name of that Shark Tank rather gentleman you're speaking about, because he has really stood up, and he's been on media on left-wing and right-wing media in the US, and he's been actually speaking up for the country. He's been telling the truth. And I tip my hat to the guy from the point of view, what he said on channels like, NBC, CNN, things like that, who are just, all they're just doing is being on the attack and being very negative. He's told them the truth, talking to these journalists, and these journalists don't know what they're talking about. Every time I say the word journalist, I want to do air quotes, okay? I really do. That's how my mind does.
Legacy journalists.
Legacy journalists. There we go. I like that very much. Or corporate media. But let's go further on that anyway.
Well, let's have a look at the next slide here. This marks an important deal that's happened with on Friday. US President Donald Trump announced his first post-tariff agreement with a historic deal, he was saying, with the UK. If we look at the next one there, Travis, considering a major win for the US but a loss overall for Britain, some critics are saying. Now, I don't know. Is that number 2 or number 1?
Yeah,
number 1 there.
I don't know why it's labeled backwards, but anyway.
Never mind.
Okay, so what Donald Trump says put out there is agreement with the UK is a full and comprehensive one that will cement the relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom for many years to come. Because of a long time of history and allegiance together, it's a great honour to have the United Kingdom as our first announcement. Many other deals which are in serious stages of negotiation to follow. What's interesting about this is apparently at the 11th hour, Donald Trump called Starmer and while he was watching his favourite team play soccer, or football as they say over there in the UK, and finalised some details on it late at night. What they've had is a negotiator from England also over there at the White House. You'll see him in the next bit of footage that we're about to show. But this is really interesting because critics are saying, this is bad for England. But you hear the politicians actually saying it's actually quite, if you listen to the uncut footage of Starmer on the phone, they had him on the phone and he sounds as happy as Larry about the deal and all that kind of thing. So you do wonder what goes on behind closed doors and this sort of thing. The agreement is yet to be fully worked out. Reducing tariffs on British steel, aluminium, those are the two ones that the US did target.
I think the Americans are only interested in the aluminum.
Yeah, aluminum. And aircraft engine exports, the US down to 0. And meanwhile, taxes are on to basically 100,000 British cars exported annually to the US. That was being done at a 27.5% rate.
Okay.
They're now dropping that to 10%. So what they have realised is the UK have said, listen, we need to protect our British car industry here, manufacturing industry, because people's livelihoods and jobs are here. And the US has basically been able to come out and say, yeah, we can do that at 10% rate. So Howard Lutnick, he's happy because they've got their 10% tariff on steel, and that'll produce $6 billion of revenue for the United States. The UK is having to buy more US agriculture and industrial products as well. So they've kind of done a deal. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll reduce it here if you buy some more of our produce, and
fair.
And we'll do some swappies
as
far as that is concerned.
Okay.
In lead up to the negotiations of the EU, a lot of them were actually quite nervous about where that was all going, and that's interesting in relation to what was being said. This is because England's in a really interesting position where as far as the EU is concerned. And so the EU have kind of had a kick in the guts from the United States saying, hey, we're not just going to be the one to jump to your defense all the time and foot the bill because of it. And I think the EU is being shaken and rattled by that and going, well, where do we go from here?
Agreed.
Particularly with the globalist agenda. And the EU apparently was being in constant contact with the UK saying, hey, warning against trade concessions to DJT, warning that Keir Starmer's Brexit reset sources, this may not be what we accept. And, it's kind of the political parties going, well, if you're with them, then this is going to give and take here. And
give and take. Here's the thing. Okay. Donald Trump represents, to me, I mean, this is my take. Everyone's got a different feeling, but I mean, to me, he's very much anti the great world government. Okay, that whole side of things. Whereas Keir Starmer, he's all for it. He's a complete globalist, rather, absolutely full on. And so, look, coming to the table and having to negotiate over actually goods, over tariffs, all that sort of thing. I think there's a greater flow on. When you look at when we're talking about free speech in the UK, things like that, there's more to this than just percentage on a bit of paper here.
Well, you're exactly right on the free speech sort of thing. It's interesting you bring that up because we saw a lot of concern over some of the legislation that the UK, that England was passing. If you posted something on social media, you could end up in prison. And people are going, well, is this a free nation or isn't it?
So,
Travis?
That's the thing. Like in the UK, they have actually jailed people for what they've said on social media. So it's not like you will end up in jail.
Yeah. That's something you'll do. Oh, look, people in the UK are being. There's a guy in jail at the moment for standing somewhere in silent prayer. Right? Yeah. It's just this is the world we live in at the moment. So anybody who's standing up to the globalists is okay by me. And if you're using tariffs to do so, and look, I'm fighting on this one because part of me doesn't want one nation pushing another nation in any direction as far as controlling their policy or the way that they run their social structure. But at the same time, when we see this globalist agenda, we see so much damage happening to individual countries. To me, somebody has to step in.
There's another argument on that, which is really, really interesting. If the United States doesn't be the world policeman role, who fills the vacuum? Somebody else will jump up there. And is it a nation who has values that you necessarily agree with or want to be in the world policeman role?
It'll be China.
So I'm saying, okay, we all agree. I think we can all agree the US hasn't always got it right. No. There are things where they've gone in with their own interests and you go, really? And you wonder how much corruption's internally as opposed to, hey, being the world policeman and not abusing that position. But the other side of that is, would you prefer another nation doing that role or would you rather the United States doing it?
No, I like the United States doing it. And even though they have got it wrong on many occasions, and I've been very critical of that, I think they've done a shocking job on many occasions. The fundamental thing is, as I've grown older and got more information, is that, okay, we live in Australia, we don't have a Bill of Rights.
Australia.
We don't have a Bill of Rights. We've got a constitution which is extremely flexible, we'll call it that. So, and you see what's happening in the UK. You see just the centuries of just corruption and nepotism and all of that, right? So, from my point of view, okay, relatively speaking, age-wise, the United States is a newer country. It's not as entrenched in all of that from what Europe has gone through. And on top of that, of course, they have a Bill of Rights and a constitution that they live by. And the great thing about their constitution is the kids are taught about it in school, and there's we care about it, or they care about it, I should say. Look at me, I've just become American. If I ever want to move to America and I want citizenship, okay, can you just grab that soundbite and send that to them with my application?
So, Aaron, I just want to bring you back to something where you were saying you don't want to see a country bullying another country. Mm-hmm. Do you think trade is an expression of free speech?
You asked me the question?
Yeah. And here's why I'm raising this question. Is trade and how you interact with other countries an expression of free speech? So what's happening is England has come out and said, right, these are our free speech laws. We don't jail you for what you say on social media. All three of us, if we lived in England, would probably be in jail. So America's going, you know what? If you want to trade with us, I want you to reform your free speech rules, or we're not done play with you. We're not done talk with you. It is our right to deal with whoever we want to. And if you want to trade in the American market, that's the condition. So you don't have to trade. if
But
you
what
want
you
to
said
keep,
is very, very accurate. Okay, like from the point of view of we're sitting here, we have a show like this that goes all across the world, right? And what we're saying, if we were doing this in the UK, we
Oh,
would
would
all
be-
be us. Tommy Robinson style.
would be hanging with Tommy Robinson.
Yeah, well, pretty good company, I guess, in a lot of ways, right? But that is the reality of it. So, like, we need to use these mechanisms, whether they be trade, whether they be tariffs, to influence the world to give this freedom. Freedom is the fundamental. It's not a privilege. It's a goddamn right. Yeah.
And I just wish America would do the same to Australia. So, just because the comment won't come up on for some reason, StreamYard doesn't show personal comments. So, Christian, hey, just want to say a big thanks to my salesman in Ellenbrook Speedway canteen yesterday, Aaron Malloy. Thank you so much. Christy Watson's love your support. So, Aaron was rocking it out the Ellenbrook Speedway by the sounds of it.
I was there. I tell you what, I learned to be a checkout chick for the first time in my life. It was pretty cool.
If we weren't on air, I would so say you got the boobs for it.
Oh, look, I leaned forward and got a little, anyway. It was fantastic. Really enjoyed it. And we were talking about this just before we came on air, Derek and I think I spoke to everybody and I was asking them how they were going in their races and all that. And they're looking at me like, this is strange. We're normally, they take our money and we go, and I'm having little conversations with everybody. So all a bit of fun,
So,
And if you can't help family out, who can you help out, right?
Bringing it back to the show for Derek. I think what America's doing, someone has to fill that role as the world police. And to be honest with you, I'd rather it be a God-fearing country than a God-hating country.
Great point.
So
Really.
it's, again, I've raised a point with the Freedom Friday. We'll come to air on Friday this week. It's a pre-record show we do. But there's a great little saying in the gaming community, don't be a D. And so, see that, Derek? I censored myself for you, so you didn't have to edit it. But it just, don't be a D. Like, if you're being an idiot, just don't. Stop it. And if America has to get the wooden paddle out and say, no, behave, then I'm all for it, to be honest with you. And hurry up, bring that paddle to Australia. Bring some, was it high school punishment? Put your hands out, give it the cane.
Oh, I had the cane quite a few times in high school, right? So, it did. I mean, it whipped me into shape. I was off the rails.
Does that explain your history searches?
What was that?
Does it explain your browser history searches?
Back in those days, we didn't have internet.
No, thankfully.
I remember the day. I remember the day when they took us down to the library to show us what a computer was.
Really?
We're that era, Travis.
Oh, yeah. Thank goodness no one had camera phones. That's all I can say. There we go. No, but look, but hang on. That's a really good little segue in a strange way. Okay, we're ultimately talking here about freedom. Right? This is what we're talking about. And I do feel very, very sorry for the current generation, the fact that they can't live with this freedom. We thank goodness we have no records of what we got up to as teenagers and 20s and whatever. Okay, there's a lot of bad history there or messy history. It's a wonderful thing to have that freedom, and I am so thankful. I'm happily, very, very proudly Gen X, and it's a very special time. So what I'm kind of getting at in my little roundabout way is whatever we have to do to protect freedoms in the world, the foot should be flat on the throttle all the way. This should be your primary thing and way of thinking.
And this is why I'm a big supporter of Australia becoming the 51st state of America.
No.
That Bill of Rights actually is. Like, it is absolutely crucial. Hey, we got a gate crasher. Should we let him in?
Sure. There goes the neighbourhood. I can see the title, but fella attached. Never mind. He'll be here any minute, I reckon.
I'll give him a moment to get himself sorted out. Oh, no.
Yeah,
Look at that.
There we go. Look at that. He's right now the wheel of death. Oh, he's on the move. Done.
I'm on the move. Here we go. It's only because I heard somebody say something about people not being on camera phones. I thought, I'll come in and
we'll let anyone in. Good to see you, buddy. Hey, what are your thoughts on the subjects we've been talking about?
I've got absolutely no idea because I just got here.
Oh, there you go. See, I'm assuming you're listening on edgeradioaustralia.com, but there we go.
No, I'm in a meeting, and I'm in another one of my undisclosed locations.
Let's have a look at the next bit of footage. This is where Trump is announcing it to the press, as he does. I love in terms of how he's done this. He hasn't gone the old traditional press conferences. He's brought him into the Oval Office and said, this is where I'm doing it. I'm signing it in front of you, under your noses. But of course, this one's a little bit different because he's brought the ambassador in as well on this footage. And we don't see this in this segment, but he actually had Keir Starmer on the speakerphone as far as the phone was concerned.
Is that right?
From the England. So let's take a look at this piece of footage.
By saying that this is a very special day because it's Victory Day, World War II, May 8th, and just by happenstance, we have the Prime Minister on the phone, and we were great allies in that, and it's very unusual that the trade deal comes due, and we signed it up on the same day that we had a great victory, the greatest victory of them all. So we are talking more and more about Victory Day, because we were a big part of it, and so was the UK. And it's just, I guess, I don't know what you call it. It's just incredible that that day is the same day that we signed a tremendous trade deal for both countries. So I'm going to begin by just adding that we just concluded the rare earth deal with Ukraine. That's been fully ratified and approved by their legislative branches, and so we appreciate that, and I'll be speaking with the president in a little while, a little bit later, and we appreciate that, but the deal is all now signed up and ratified, and we have access to a massive amount of very, very high-quality rare earth.
It's interesting as you hear this. Now, I want to compare this to Ukraine in the negotiations there, but what's fascinating about this is the uncut version of this. The British are very enthusiastic about this deal. Okay. And you can see that particularly on the footage that's released from the White House there. He interesting brings up the rare earth deal they've done in Ukraine in this moment and in this segment. And
interesting time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's related to Europe, which is in England's obviously in that same boat as far as peace in the bigger continent is concerned. As I mentioned before, England's in an interesting place because of Brexit. And of course, they are needing deals outside of the European Union to do basically their economy, get their economy moving. And the United States is a big, big ally as well as far as security is concerned, or has been traditionally. There are stories that have come out on the Ukraine rare earth deal that now the central bank of Ukraine might want to move further away from doing deals pegged to the US dollar and more to the euro.
Interesting.
This is a really interesting move that they're shifting away, possibly linking its currency more closely to the euro with the whole global trade stuff. And you wonder how much is going on as far as the globalist agenda is concerned. How many strings are being pulled as far as where Ukraine is positioned here.
Is interesting.
And where it's going. So, look, we've almost got to deal with them, and it's almost like the puppets are at the table. Who's pulling the strings as far as the globalist agenda is concerned? That's really, really fascinating that, they've almost let's meet. And Putin has said, I'm willing to meet with Zelensky in person now after 3 years of conflict.
That's right.
And then they're going, right, well, the central bank is saying, well, let's reassess how we peg the Ukrainian
on that
currency.
Front, okay. I don't know. How much control of Putin do you think that these oligarchs have got?
Not a lot. And I think that's the whole deal why we had the conflict. I think that's that they wanted to weaken. There's been two agendas in the last few years, to weaken Russia and to weaken the United States.
Yep. And interesting on that thought, just sort of winding back a little bit about what Trump said, and I don't want to be anti-American here or anything like that, but I want to bring up something. That he was talking about the end of the war, right? End of World War II. Look, quite honestly, if you'd actually read your history books and have a good, and who knows who wrote those, but from the point of view, when you're reading these things, if you actually are very honest, you'll actually find that the end of the war came up a lot through Russian blood. I mean, the Russians had so much to do with the end of the war. And at that time, he's talking about May, back in 45, the Russians were, they were on the ground, right? They were the ones. So it's just interesting how history gets rewritten a little bit and they push them out of it. And the Americans just become, the big superheroes of it. And there's talk about the fact that there was actually never, ever a need to drop the atomic bomb. Okay. It was very much a propaganda call, right? So there's a lot there. This is all very complicated. This is a worldwide thing. And when we're talking, as I say, about I don't know, central governments. We're talking about all of this control. I'm encouraged, very encouraged, when I see someone standing up against it, and I'm encouraged by Putin. I'm encouraged by Putin talking to Trump. I think these are all very positive things. Yeah.
I think the two very much respect each other. They're very strong men,
Yep.
Individually. You know, you talk about the alpha male. Well, they're both alpha males.
No doubt about that.
And they have that respect, and I think they also, Trump's way of negotiating out of a war is basically, let's all get rich, let's do a deal and get rich. And he did that with North Korea in his first term.
Oh, great point.
Right? America was lining up in terms of its conflict with North Korea.
Yep.
Let's not do that. So that's his tactic as far as negotiation, as far as conflict is concerned. Let's not kill each other. Let's make a lot of money.
That's right. Let's drag people out of poverty, and and increase the strength of the middle class. What are your thoughts there, Travis?
I just want to go back to what you were saying about the Ukraine going to the euro rather than using the US dollar.
Mm-hmm.
So why was that war started in the first place? Is because NATO wanted Ukraine to be a part of them. And we know how well connected NATO is to the EU. So I just did a quick search, and Shaq will probably know this off the top of his head, but Ukraine is not a part of the the EU. So if they're trying to switch to the euro rather than using the US dollar, is that kind of a push for the EU to bring Ukraine? Yeah, we can get them into NATO, but can we get them into the European Union?
But that was the cause of the issue, as I understand it in the first place, was that the eastern part of the eastern part of Ukraine, a lot of the people there didn't want to have a close relationship with Europe, whereas the western part of the Ukraine did. And that's where Nigel Farage had said for decades, really, or for at least a decade, he was saying, stop poking the Russian bear by flirting with the Ukraine. Now, as I'm understanding it, I don't think they're suggesting that they should use the euro as their own currency. Also, I think that it would be really bad for them to do that. I think it's really bad for a country to ever use another country's currency. And if you have a look at the euro, in my personal opinion, whilst the euro does make things very, very convenient when you're traveling around Europe, I actually think the euro really should fall, and it should be split. If you don't want to have 28 countries with 28 different currencies, fair enough. But it just doesn't make sense for Germany and France, who are the big powerhouse economies of Europe, to have the same currency as Greece and Italy. Mm-hmm. And the issue that has come about is when Greece and Italy has had an economy which has faltered, they haven't been able to do things that other countries would do. If you have a look at New Zealand, for example, for a little while there, the currency had gone up to $1.30 against the Aussie. Terrible for New Zealand. Having a high currency is not necessarily a good thing. So for them, it was terrible, because what it meant was that their biggest lot of tourists come from Australia. Right? They make so much money out of Australia. And so if their currency is too high, they have a massive drop in their tourism industry. They have a massive drop in their exports, etc. So them having a lower currency actually helps them dramatically. Germany, Italy, Spain, and a number of those other countries were not able to lower their currency because they're stuck in the euro. And then not only are they stuck in the euro, but then that also drives up their borrowing costs, because they have to borrow the money at a higher interest rate because of the increased credit default risk. And so now they're having to pay more, and they can't do anything. They can't just devalue the currency to deal with it. So I would suggest that for a country like the Ukraine, that wasn't how I understood it, but the way that you've said it, Travis, is if the Ukraine wanted to use the euro, I think that would be a really bad move for the Ukraine.
No, I absolutely 100% agree with you. I think this might be a push from the EU to try and gain another partner.
But why would you do that as far as the EU is concerned? Because you've got a nation that's absolutely been blown apart over the last 3 years, literally. It's got to rebuild. It's going to drag the entire European Union down.
Do you think
from the European Union's perspective, it's a great idea? Sorry, Trevor.
Yeah.
You go.
Why do you think America was trying to do a deal with the Ukraine so badly for the rare earths? Do you think the cost to rebuild the Ukraine, is more than the value of what's in the ground? Because if they're a part of the European Union, wouldn't the European Union get a percentage of all that money?
That's it. But as I said, the thing is that for Europe, for the European Union, it'd be a fantastic thing, because they're going to
That's
come in when the country's devastated.
Yep.
It's going to be cheap for them to come in and get in. Plus, they're tethering the Ukraine. Like, they essentially would own the Ukraine. So this is the thing with that Nigel Farage and Brexit talked about a lot, right? Was instead of the people of a country being able to decide what they should and shouldn't do, and having control over their borders and having control over immigration, all that sort of stuff, you have a supranational government, essentially, which is what the European Union acted as. And you've got the European Union Parliament, and then you had European Union commissions. And the EU commissions, you don't know who the commissioners are. They're not elected. They're just these people that just, they're just bureaucrats. And then they can make a rule that all of the countries, all of the member countries of the EU have to abide by. So that's, people talk about the New World Order and the one world government and all these sorts of things, and everyone goes, they're all trying to take over the world. But really, that's what Europe did. That's essentially what Europe did, right? They formed this alliance, and instead of it just being like a trading alliance that said, well, look, we'll manage trade on sort of equal terms and make sure that regulations are relatively the same around the country, they then started dictating to all the countries what they had to do.
Yeah. So again, if you just go back to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, it started because NATO was trying to bring Ukraine in. Obviously, that's failed now. Is NATO operating through the EU to bring Ukraine into their fold around this agreement with America?
Weren't they doing that with the European Parliament anyway?
So that's what I'm saying. Like, is this? Yeah, we can't get them as a membership of NATO. That's just not going to happen now. So is this just a backdoor to get Ukraine into the EU and getting all those resources away from Russia, again, weakening Russia in the process and making...
But that potentially could be. But, bringing a country like the Ukraine into NATO, I think, is a really, really bad idea. And whilst Australia is obviously not part of the North American Treaty Organization, the idea, if anything happened in Europe, if Finland was attacked, Australia is going to be there because the US and the UK is going to be there. So now all of a sudden, anything happens to Ukraine and all of NATO has to respond. Well, that's an awful idea for us. And when I say us, I'm British. It's an awful idea for Europe and the UK to have them in NATO. It should never even be really logically considered.
But again, if you look at it from NATO perspective, they want Ukraine. From the EU perspective, they want Ukraine. So Ukraine is effectively the prize in this situation. So that's why I'm saying, like, could this possibly be a play by the EU to bring another country in extremely cheap? Buy low, sell high, it's the basics of finance, isn't it? So to me,
I think you'd have an issue, which is what they currently have, where countries are hesitant or they're trying to put some restrictions on immigration from Romania and Poland and stuff like that. So if you were to bring in the Ukraine, I'd imagine that a lot of Ukrainians, not all, most people are fairly patriotic, but a lot of Ukrainians, I think, would say, well, hey, there's a better life somewhere else in Europe, and they're all going to move to those other countries. So that would also be a concern, I think, and those big powerhouse countries like Germany, like France, the Nordic countries, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, etc., Netherlands, all those sorts of countries where you've got high quality of life and high levels of social services, they're not going to want a massive influx of people coming from much poorer conditions.
I think the European Union's got to figure out where it's going to go. I don't think they know right now, because the biggest thing is if they were trying to have an agenda of taking over Ukraine, put them in the EU, they're going to really upset Trump, who's just done a deal on rare earths, right? And that's a headache in itself for them. They're trying to figure out, where do we go from here? The US is kind of pulling back. And if anything, it looks from their point of view, from their perspective, that he's making friends with Putin. So they're in a real quandary.
Who really cares? Who really cares whether he upset Trump? Really? Like, Trump's going to be there for 3.5 years. That's all he's got left. Right? He can't run again. You're going to have another president. Now, I think most people who support Trump are going to say J.D. Vance or the Republicans are definitely going to win the next election. But you don't know. That's 3.5 years away. Who knows, right? But even if the Republicans do win, there's going to be a time when Democrats are going to come in. This is the thing with the US, is that there is a level of instability. And so the overreaction of, well, we can't upset this particular president or that particular president, who cares? Just wait a few years. That's what China's been really great at doing. I think that's what Europe will be really great at doing. It's like, okay, well, we'll just wait it out a few years and then we'll do our thing.
Good point. Good point. Let's have a look at this next part. I mean, look, as far as Australia is concerned, the biggest Aussie expert to the US is meat, and I think they've been watching how this is all going to play out with all these other nations coming to the negotiating table with the tariffs in play. Bear in mind, too, that we shipped $6.2 billion worth of meat across the Pacific. That's what it means to Australia. The next part is pearls, precious stones, and metals worth $2 billion. Pharmaceutical products, the third biggest export with $1.4 billion US. And then they get into technical stuff here in Australia. Optical, photo, technical, medical apparatus makes up $1.2 billion. And then your machinery, your nuclear reactors, as we discussed a few weeks ago, and boilers, up to $1.2 billion. That's what we are sending over to the US, as well as electrical and electronic equipment. That makes up about $686 million US, and aircraft and spacecraft as well. There you go. So,
sorry, I just wanted, did you actually say we export nuclear equipment to America?
We certainly do. Most people don't know that.
So just so you know, Travis, most of the nuclear weaponry, including actually, from my understanding, including the bombs that were dropped in Japan, the uranium and plutonium and all that stuff that was in those came from Australia.
I knew about the uranium and the plutonium came from Australia. I didn't know the actual reactors, the boilers and all that actually were manufactured here as well. That's hilarious.
So, I mean, how the mighty fall, though. This is what Stephen Petherton and Joel and myself had this discussion quite a while ago on his program where, you know, we are not able to, if our oil supply got cut off, we've got oil here in Australia, but we've got no way of refining it. We've got no way of doing anything. And I think that what Trump has brought up, even those people that wouldn't necessarily consider themselves to be right-wing or centre-right, have to acknowledge that actually there are some real structural problems in how our countries operate. We're way too reliant on other nations, even if those other nations are friends of ours. You know, friendships, look what happens when something goes wrong, a country is required to look after their own people before they look after the countries that they're friends with. So
just seeing the election results, I think there's an extreme amount of people who are just ignorant of the way the world works. And I think a lot of people are going to suffer in the next 3 years because of that ignorance. And if you turn around and said, oh, you know, we've got to start being self-reliant to a university student, I think you'll probably find a large majority of them will say, oh, no, we don't. We'll just get it from the supermarket. And that's the level of their understanding of the world at large. And it concerns me that I think Australia is rapidly catching America about how, yes, America has some amazingly smart people, but they've also got some amazingly stupid people. And I think that Australia is catching up on, we've got some phenomenally smart people and phenomenally ignorant people. And
look, we're very competitive. We are getting some of
them is just shit.
But to be fair, I think that there's an attitude in Australia of, you know, the sort of she'll be right, mate, sort of thing. And I think that most people, myself included, you know, although I appear on, you know, political programs all over the world, I don't like politics at all. I hate it. I absolutely hate politics. I just want to be left alone. You know, and I think most people do. They're just like, look, if I get sick, I want to be able to go to the hospital. When I have kids, I want my kids to be able to go to school and have a proper education. Like, this is all I want. Like, you know, people just want things to run, and we don't want to be watching politicians all day, every day, getting in our face. That's you know, true. If Albo hadn't have brought up The Voice and done some of the divisive things he's done, I wouldn't really be that bothered that he won. I'd be like, okay, whatever. You know, the Liberals had a go for a decade. Now the Labor Party's in for a couple of terms. Like, whatever, no problems. The reason why I think people are so unhappy, and once again, we've turned into New Zealand on this. He only won, what did he get, 30% or 33% or something of the popular vote? Which is exactly what he got last time. Should have been, and with 30% of the popular vote, he goes down as being one of the Labor greats because he got a second term. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Bob Hawke and Anthony Albanese. I mean, fucking hell.
Just a quick shout out to Corey. I'm going to bring Corey's comment up there again, if I may. There we go. Corey's Sorry, Casey.
Is it Casey?
Yes,
Yeah.
Casey. He's got the glasses on. G'day, Casey. Good to see you all the way from America. And, mate, you're not one of those dumb Americans because you're watching this show. That is showing your intelligence. You're really at a whole different level, mate. And, look, we only encourage people who believe in critical thinking on this show. So good on you, mate. Welcome to the family.
Let's have a look at this next.
I think most people just want to be left alone and know things that work. And I think that's the same thing with Americans. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're dumb, although some of them are. But I wouldn't go so far as to say they're dumb. I would just say that a lot of them are more focused on how do I make my mortgage payment? What's my cost of living? How do I pay for things? And it's only when things get ridiculous when they actually step up. Like, no, you can't tell my 4-year-old that gender doesn't exist and, hey, you can be a boy, you can be a girl, you can be something in between. And the kid can barely wipe their own ass. Like, leave the kids alone. That's when parents start to get a little bit more, upset. But when it came to Common Core, for example, which I believe was a terrible way of doing things, just in maths, for example, it's confusing to the kids. It's confusing to me. Like, I just don't understand why they're trying to teach kids maths like this. It just hasn't worked. That stuff, when was the last time you heard anyone mention Common Core education? Nobody does, because people don't pay attention to that stuff. That doesn't mean they're dumb. It's just that they're relying on the so-called experts to provide the best quality education to their kids, and that's what's not happening.
Yep, and that's my point when I said that education systems are failing our younger generations.
Let's jump to the video. Okay, are you ready there, Travis, to hit the old go on that video?
Scott, we'll be going for number 4.
So Scott Bessent is the 79th United States Secretary of the Treasury since 2025. Of course, he got nominated this year on this position. He's come out and said this about the United States. Have a listen.
Will never default, that we will raise the debt ceiling, and Treasury will not use any gimmicks. We will make sure that the debt ceiling is raised.
All right. This is really, really fascinating because, as we can see, the whole, we just talked about the Ukraine moving the central bank of Ukraine wanting to move away from the US dollar in terms of pegging its currency to other currencies, to more of the euro. We've heard this from him saying we want to raise the debt ceiling. And the other card here is, of course, we've got all these crypto treasuries coming out from the Trump administration, where they want a treasury to control the cryptos. And of course, those cryptos aren't controlled by central banks. So this is a really interesting statement that he comes out and says, yes, the United States will do that. Is he doing this in this kind of...
He's doing exactly what my ex-wife did to my credit card. Okay? Just keeps upping the bloody balance. Throw another 10 grand on it. Throw another 10 grand on it. That's all this is. And you know what? One day, theoretically, you've got to pay the debt, right? Well, I had to. So, but in this case, the generations that follow are having to pay this credit card off.
Well, while that's going on, you have a look at how many nations are dumping US treasuries. That's really, really fascinating. Japan and China have been consistently having major holders of treasuries, but they're reducing their holders recently. The US treasury shows that Japan's holding fell to 1.06 trillion in December and China's to 759 billion. The UK has also been letting that go. The other nations that are reducing that as well. So it's really interesting to see what's going to happen to the US dollar moving forward.
So the one thing you got to take into account with Japan, they've just through Parliament have abolished their pacifist stance on their military. So they've gone from a 2% GDP on their military spending to a 5% GDP spending. So they had to get a lot of money really quickly to boost their military. So what's the easiest way to get money? Dump the treasuries. So I think the Japanese side of things...
5% seems extraordinarily high.
Yes. But you got to also remember Russia's also causing a lot... We were talking about this one on the Freedom Friday that's come up in the last couple of weeks. So Russia and Japan are fighting over a couple of islands on the north side of Japan. And then in the South China Seas where Japan, there's 4 islands that are openly disputed between China and Japan. Japan claims ownership. China landed a heap of troops on one of the islands, tried to claim it for their own. So there's a lot of tensions going on, and with what's going on in Taiwan as well. So Japan's officially has changed their military stance from a pacifist, where they never spend more than 2%, to now they've boosted it and they've passed it through Parliament.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, before he was assassinated, was talking about this, that Japan should be more involved, and I think they should as well. I mean, World War II was a long time ago, different generation. The world changed, and certainly I trust Japan a lot more today. They're our friends. I've been to Japan several times. I think Japan is a wildly different place to what it was back then. I'll just say in relation to the dumping of the US Treasuries, what Travis said, that yes, nations need to unload some of this. I think the UK, not a great position. But the other thing to remember is that a lot of countries and companies and people bought US securities, US Treasuries during COVID. They need to offload those at some point. And so now when people, and governments want to use that money for more productive purposes, now is a good time to start getting rid of some of it. The big question that people have brought up, and I've actually had, just random people ask me about the offloading of Chinese-owned US Treasury bonds. And is that a huge concern? I'm actually not that worried about that. And I'll tell you why. That although China is one of the largest holders of American bonds, they own about $3 trillion or something, right? But sorry, they own a few $1 trillion. So they own like 3% of the outstanding amount of bonds. So you can dump 3% off them, and the market will absorb that. So I'm really not that worried about that person.
So I was watching China Decoded YouTube channel, and they did a big breakdown of what was happening with the dumping of the bonds, and that they were saying the evidence was pointing towards China with this trade war that was going on. They were trying to hurt the US dollar to try and limit the impact of what the trade war was going to have, and they were doing that by dumping the US bonds.
Well, again, I'm not sure that's a really good idea, because a low US dollar would really help Americans, because it would mean that US goods become cheaper to buy. And I'll just remind people that live in Australia that when September 11 occurred, the Australian dollar fell to below 40 cents against the US. And as a result, we had from 2001, which is when I came of age, when I turned 18, we had a massive decade-long boom. Then the Great Recession happened in the US, and what happened? There was a rush to commodity products, which Australia benefited from, and we boomed again. So talk about the lucky country. We've had it pretty bloody good. I mean, you ask a kid who grew up through 2008 in America, they're going to tell you how horrible it was. You ask a kid in Australia, they're going to go, "What recession? What are you talking about? It was brilliant." So our problem is that we've been mismanaged. But as far as how these international trade things affect us, I think we've been pretty lucky. The other thing is that because the Chinese are falling out with the Americans, if we just sit back and just chill out and not get too involved, we do need to improve our relationship with the US, not because of Trump and what's happening right now, but just in general. I think we should always be strengthening our ties with one of our closest and most important allies. But that doesn't mean that we are tethered to US foreign policy. The Chinese have now started buying our wine again. They've started buying our agricultural products again. And they're actually buying our meat products again. So I've got some friends of mine in China that are now telling me that they have, for the first time in a long time, seen Australian mince, Australian beef, Australian and New Zealand lamb, etc. that's over there. That's a fantastic thing for us, because we want to be selling our products into a market as big as that. And the Chinese, by trying to hurt America, are actually coming to us. And I would argue, having been all over the world, I would argue that Australian and New Zealand beef and dairy and lamb, etc., is the best in the world,
Right.
in my personal opinion.
I can say that because I'm in Vietnam, and I have never struggled so much being a coffee addict, not being able to get good milk. All of it tastes like powder milk over here. It's rancid. Yeah. And
Look, years ago, I wanted to sell Australian dairy to Dubai, because I knew some people that were in charge of the buying departments at some major shopping centre chains over there. It just became too cost prohibitive. I don't know what I'm doing in milk. That's not my business. It just became too cost prohibitive to be able to send the milk over. I've still considered it. I was talking about that last year, I think. But I think that our agricultural products is something to be really proud of. And I think that we should be showcasing. And that's what I'd expect from an Australian trade representative. Right? That's what you want government people to be doing. Go and promote our stuff all over the bloody world.
We'll just have a look what they did with
I think just getting back to Japan, I think you've got to watch this too. Japan is a big embracer of cryptocurrency. A lot of the hedge fund managers are really going all in on that. And in terms of running their economies. So it's fun to watch. I'm like, I keep telling my students, keep your eye on Japan. Keep your eye on Japan.
Japan just does everything great. Like, Japan's awesome. So
let's all move.
How good is it when you're in crypto, you don't run the risk of being debanked? Like Nigel Farage was debanked by Coutts and Co. And then couldn't open up a bank account with any other bank in Europe, in the UK. How great is it not to have to worry about that stuff? Not to have to worry about the banks, watching everything that you do and where's your money going, and you want to make a withdrawal, what you need the money for. If you're going to force us to be cashless, no worries. Bye.
Strange little segue on that. We talked before about my little, I don't know, volunteer job yesterday. Okay, being the checkout chick, and I'm telling you right now, I was encouraging everybody to use cash. I'm having little conversations about it, and they go, "Yeah, we're sick of the control. I like to spend my money where I want to spend my money." Exactly that. And cash is freedom. So let's hold on to it. Yeah.
Can I just make a quick comment about this?
Yeah.
So, not that I drink a lot or anything, but when I very rarely and very occasionally buy alcohol, I'll often get it delivered by DoorDash or Uber Eats.
Okay.
So I've gone for a holiday just recently, in the last couple of months. I went up to Coffs Harbour. Now, there were 11 at the first night. There were 11 adults and 5 kids. We get up there, and I'm ordering alcohol for different people. They're all arriving at different times. So we placed 5 orders, and I think I ordered about $1,000 worth of alcohol on that first night because we were going to be there for a week and a couple of days, right? So I placed 5 orders, about $200 each. I get an email from Uber Eats, and it says, in line with our DrinkWise policy, we're reviewing your account for excessive alcohol purchasing. We're worried about your health, and we're worried about this and that, blah blah. Now Uber knows where I live, right? At the places where I generally live, because that's where I'm ordering. That's where my registered address is, and all that. So they know that I'm not home. But that's besides the point. Who the hell are you to tell me what's good and what's not good for me? I'm 41 years old. Leave me alone. And my question is that the government can't stop me from drinking. Well, they did during COVID. Remember those people that were stuck in the apartment buildings that were government quarantined, that were told you could only have 6 beers a day? Again, who the hell's the government to tell them this? But if the government can't stop me from buying alcohol, but Uber Eats is going to restrict my access to alcohol, right? What's going to stop the banks from saying, "Oh, we saw that you spent $300 or $400 at the pub"? The hell with the fact that, hey, it was somebody's birthday and I was shouting around or something. No, you spent too much money tonight at the pub, so we're going to restrict your use of your credit card or your debit card at the pub for the next 3 months because we're worried about your health. And that's where I see this going, and I think it's absolutely appalling.
No, it's very real and something we've got to act against, and we shouldn't. I mean, look, if Nigel Farage can be debanked, okay, and not have access to opening other account, when we're talking about a political leader in one of the most, in Europe, the most central sort of locations, it just shows how if they can do it to him, they can do it to anybody, right? You can see this can happen to the everyday person, and exactly right. That they're not happy with what you're drinking, they're not happy with what you're eating, all that sort of thing. There's far too much control, and we've got to actually stand up and make sure that we don't accept it. And for all of those people who are a bit of live as lemmings, okay, and let it all happen to you, it's time you turn off your TV and actually start to listen to some real information.
Yeah,
well, the good thing is that a lot of people aren't watching TV now, are they? Legacy media is dying. People are getting all their information from podcasts. And I mean, look at the popular ones. The Young Turks over on the left. Young Turks, pretty popular. Their ratings are higher than CNN's and the mainstream media on the left. Have a look at PPD podcast and Joe Rogan and all those sorts of guys. All of those guys have got massive ratings.
They do.
Legacy media is dying because they're dishonest, and people are tired of them.
And they're drawing big names. The president in his election campaign, he wanted to speak to Joe Rogan,
for
right?
3 hours.
Yeah, and then Kamala's trying to do it. They couldn't make it happen, and she failed dismally.
Derek talked about Alpha. Derek talked about alpha males earlier. Can you imagine? Not that I have anything against women. I think that the Iron Maiden, she's the Iron Lady, as they say, Margaret Thatcher. I think she did a reasonably good job. She certainly had a lot of tenacity. But could you imagine Hillary Clinton? Sorry, not Hillary Clinton. What's the name again? Obama? No, what's the name? Sorry, Kamala.
Kamala.
Can you imagine Kamala Harris trying to negotiate something with Putin and Zelensky?
No.
Can you
I can't.
imagine her trying to bring this forward?
I know it'd be quite funny to watch. There'd be a lot of laughing involved, or cackling, similar sort of thing. Gentlemen, we've hit the end of the show. In fact, like always, we've run over well and truly, but hey, that's what we do. Thank you very much for being part of it. Great to see some new followers. We're using things differently, and we can't actually see everybody's sent their messages through. So thank you so much for that. We will look through the week and have a bit of a read and comment and reply to everybody we possibly can. Look, hey, keep this freedom fight alive. If you want to do something really positive as far as financially, talk to this fella. Now, Travis, would you like to give him the big spruik?
So Derek is responsible for me relocating to Halong Bay. He made things possible for us. But his courses are phenomenal. The after-hours support, like the phone calls at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, he just loves them. No, I never did that. But yeah, Blue Sky Factory. There it is, the email down the bottom. So
Yep.
I've made a new ticker for him today. So bluskyfactory.com.au. It has a heap of free courses, some relatively cheap ones, and also the ones that I did, the options trading courses that he does were absolutely phenomenal. And thanks to that, and I know this gentleman here on my screen makes a few guest appearances as well. So I cannot stress enough, make sure you learn them, because it just opens up the whole entire world for you. So if you don't like the country you're in, you can just jump countries and do whatever you need to do.
I'll take this opportunity to thank Derek as well. Derek, thank you so much for giving him the ability to leave the country.
Thank you for that.
On that bombshell. We're out of here. Thank you very much for being part of the Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio Australia.